All right, so yeah, let's talk about the game that just happened. We have the Mason Punchers going up against the New Deal Lions. That quite a game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And when you say crunchers, they were pretty physical, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The Schultz kid who ended up getting the
he was a defensive MVP.
Defensive MVP voted on by the media.
Stone Stoltz.
Yeah, that kid, that Stoltz was he was something else. They just did not have an answer for him.
No.
Up front, New Deal.
No, and it was from the opening snap. He was just tearing people up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think New Deal did a really good job defensively, at least if you can say that in a crushing loss like this. They did a pretty good job though. Up front at times, putting Mason, in third and medium and third and longs at times, but just gave it up on those third downs. But, going back to Mason defensively,
right,
they did a real good job on New Deal, pretty much made New Deal one-dimensional. They shut down that vertical passing game for New Deal.
On those first two interceptions in the first half were really caused by pressure from the defensive line. Especially the first one that was deep into into Mason territory, just overthrew the receiver because he had one of those aggressive defensive linemen in his face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the bracket coverage, the safeties for Mason, especially in the first half. You'd have a New Deal guy with one-on-one coverage receiver, and that safety was there just in time to give overtop coverage, and New Deal just could not get it done down the field, could not stretch the field, and Mason and Stoltz just pinned their ears back, and that's where I think that's the difference, at least in the first half.
Well, and Kevin, you mentioned that they got one-dimensional. You can't get much more one-dimensional than quarterback Jet Whitfield here. He had 20 of their 25 carries, and he was the only one throwing the ball. So he's the only guy touching the ball every single play almost.
Yeah, and pretty un-Whitfield-like numbers throwing the ball.
No doubt.
6 out of 16, 2 interceptions. But in this day and age, no matter the level, especially in the state title game, and you hold a team to less than 200 yards of total offense, it's pretty impressive. As much as the Mason rushing game, you kind of look at it and go, they're just kind of having their way. I think it was the defense that set the tone.
But, Mason has 2 100-yard rushers in this game, and Jake Cockerham and Clay Kerner. And don't forget Otto Wolford, the quarterback, ran for over 71. So when you're able to ground and pound, for 3-point attack, 2 running backs and a quarterback on the ground, what's New Deal supposed to do, especially when they're getting manhandled up front?
Yeah, when we're watching the game, the guy next to me was saying, wow, this Mason team really passes well, and I thought they were a running team. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, they are a running team.
Yeah, but I think that running set up their passes. But, one of the differences I saw is that I saw New Deal with several drops. And whether that was nerves or just kind of knowing the game is already kind of spoken for. But, 13 out of 16 for Wofford. And that may be a season high because they probably haven't had to throw that much. Very impressive. It's surprising because you would think that would be something you see from the New Deal offense.
Yeah, going back to Mason's defense, they held Whitfield, Jet Whitfield, that quarterback for New Deal, to under 100 yards passing. Did not allow a 100-yard rusher. I think Jet Whitfield, the quarterback, had 80 yards on the ground, 20 carries, though. After that, he was the leading rusher.
2.3 yards a carry. That,
right.
That's not going to get it done.
And something that's indicative of Class 2A football, he's also the leading tackler on defense from his safety position with 10, including 8 solo. When your safety is your leading tackler, that's never good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, what do you think about this next one?
Well, I tell you, this is a tough one. We talked about it on the show the other night, and man, I've got personal reasons why I want Canadian to win, but gosh, you can't pick against that Newton team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This Newton defense is, I think we said it on the show the other night, is as electric as their offense is, and the way they can hit you from so many ways. It's this Newton defense. It's really the unsung hero here, averaging 8.8 points a game given up. Canadian is not going to be fancy. They're going to be physical on both sides of the ball. They're going to live off a Case and Cavalier trying to extend drives with his arms and his legs.
Yeah.
But is that going to be enough? Because you have to get in a track meet against this Newton team to win. I know East Bernard didn't do it, but let's face it, East Bernard, they made their hay off defense this whole year. They had the style of offense, and it was on a kind of a nasty night the other night. It's a nice 70 degrees inside of AT&T Stadium right here, except for in here it's a little hot. So. But
well, if it's possible for a predominantly passing team to control the ball and control the clock, I think it would be the best of both worlds. So they're going to have to be efficient. They're going to have to keep the Newton offense off the field as much as possible. I know they're not a ground and pound attack, but I would have to say, Canadian really opened my eyes when they held Gunner to 7 points. I've seen Gunner over the last couple of years and what they do with Jake Fizzell, and they're one of the most physical teams, especially on defense, that I've seen at that level.
Right.
When they won a state title a couple of years ago against Bowling, I was amazed at how much they swarmed to the football and how hard they hit, regardless of their size. So for Canadian to hold that rushing attack of Gunner to 7 points, maybe that speaks well for the Wildcats.
Well, and you mentioned Newton's unsung aspect is the defense, but I agree that Canadian, a lot of people overlook the fact that this is a defensive powerhouse. You pay attention to the Cavaliers and the McCooks and all the accolades they get as they're putting up offensive numbers, but they shut people down.
Yeah.
Oh,
hey, it was your mom.
No, it was Trump. He can win.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I expect this Canadian defense to keep them in the ballgame a little bit at some point. At some point, I think Newton probably runs away with this game because I think even the most physical defense gets tired chasing all those athletes around for 4 quarters. 48 minutes.
The Canadian may not have the equivalent of a Darwin Barlow.
Yeah, right.
They do have some nice skill position players, but do they have anybody that's dynamic?
Yeah, Huckstetler's a really good running back, but I don't think he's a Darwin Barlow. I don't think there's I don't think Canadian expects to come in and match the athleticism for sure. So they're really just gonna try to make this an ugly game.
And I was thinking this could be a game where Canadian could catch them off guard, and I even wrote that up in my write up about the game. But as you mentioned on the show, they've had that test, that wake up call against East Bernard, so they're ready now.
Yeah. Both teams have 4 state titles, so it's nothing new here for them.
Yeah.
Canadian's been to the state semifinals a couple times also as well. And of course, we all know about Newton's recent history. So I don't think the stage or the big stadium is really going to be a factor for either team.
Yeah.
Cool. So assuming, whichever one wins, does this become one of the greatest teams of all time in this classification?
Well, I don't know about classification because you still have, Dangerfield, right?
I said one of them. I don't think anybody's going to touch 83.
Yeah, I think they do, especially if Newton wins. I mean, the skins they put on the wall last year, following up what they did.
Right.
I think if you look at in a short period of time, right, and you try to compare that to somebody else, it may be one of the best ever. And maybe not in one single season, but in a short, kind of like what you're seeing with Alabama and college football in this 8 to 10 year stretch.
I hope that's a short period.
So like a 5 or 6 year stretch.
Yeah.
Could this be,
I think either one qualifies
this year's
5 or 6
Newton team. What if they go in and they win this game handily?
Yeah.
If you just look at it by FBS signees, you could say, because there's quite a few Division I players on this Newton team, you could look at that and they could make a case for being top 3 teams of all time in this classification.
Yeah, and in the end, I think that'll be the difference. Are those D1 athletes on the Newton side?
Yeah.
So one thing I'll be looking for from the Canadian defense, do we see any schemes that are designed particularly for this kind of offense, or do they stick with their base and just try to say, we're all going to run to the football, because there could be several different schools of thought here.
Mhm.
It could be we're just going to pressure and attack the quarterback and, try to make it just difficult for him. Or we're going to play under and over, or we're going to play zone a little bit, try to keep him in front of us. I'm glad. I wouldn't want to be a defensive coach, especially at this level and in this game, for either side, but especially if I'm Canadian, it's like pick your poison.
Right.
All right. You're
Cool.
going to make
Yeah.
a pick. We're, 18 minutes away from kickoff.
Yeah, it's about time to head back down there. It's funny because the computer's so far away, I can't read what anybody's saying. To us.
Looks like we had a question from Michael DeLeon. Is anyone going to come close to topping what home did in one half last night?
Yeah.
No, I don't
No.
think so. I think Darwin Barlow could put up some numbers over the course of 4 quarters here, but he's going to have to work for them. There's no way.
And they don't have to have
Canadian's
just
not
him.
gonna roll
Right,
over.
right,
Yeah.
right. Sure. So, it won't happen in this game, I don't
Right.
think. But, who knows?
Cool.
Wow.
All right.
So you want to do predictions?
Go
Yeah.
for it. I'll go last.
Oh, okay. So you're taking Canadian. I heard you say that earlier.
Since I'm more the neophyte here, I have to pick Newton. And part of me, I want it to remain a very competitive game, at least by half. That's always my want, is keep it a game by half. I don't know how Canadian can hold serve, so I'll say Newton 48 and Canadian 30.
Kevin says Newton 48-30. Grant. What does Grant think?
What does
Well,
Grant think?
Grant thinks that Newton will put up 40 plus, though I think it will take them. It will take some work to put up 40 plus. That being said, now we'll put up 80.
Right.
And it'll be 80-6. I think Canadian is physical enough on both sides, maybe to force a turnover or two. Excuse me. I'm going 42-14 Newton.
Nice. Well, I think if it's a close game, Canadian wins it.
Mhm.
I don't think it'll be a close game, though.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Never
think
say never.
I think Newton's going to end up winning it, but I don't think they're going to score more than 30, and they'll probably win by about 10.
All right, fun.
Okay,
So
cool.
we'll be back
But after this game,
after
before
this
the next
game
one.
to review this one and predict the next one, which is Malakoff and
Grandview.
Grandview.
Cool.
Excellent. All right,
All right. Thanks a lot. We'll check
Adios.
you in a minute.
sayonara.
LoneStarGridiron.com. Access the complete history of Texas high school football, over 100 years of information, win-loss records, coaching histories, individual stats, records, and more. Lone Star Gridiron, the authority on Texas high school football.